Yeah, so you brought your notebook for the presentation.
What's that?
Yeah, your own notebook for the presentation.
Yeah. I'm going to do a couple of housekeeping things while we're waiting for Representative Holmes to come in. My name is Fran Miller, and I am chairman of the Marketing Skills Study Committee. And if y'all would, we're going to have the next meeting of this committee on October the 10th. We'll probably use this room again. It's going to be probably from around 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock. By the way, this is not going to last till 5 o'clock. I promise y'all. Let me have an amen out there, Howard. Amen. Thank you. And the next committee here we're going to have 3 principals come in from the state. Debbie Freeman from Dalton High School will be here. Gary Blount from Camden County, St. Mary's area, and Vincent Murray from Grady, and talk about some of the successes they've had in dealing with career technology and incorporating this in the high school program. And we're also going to have Bob Couch from, since Georgia beat South Carolina, I was allowed to invite him. He's in charge of their career technical education program. They're one of the few states that have actually passed legislation in this field. We'll get his insights on the intent of their legislation, the implementation procedure, which I think is a 3-year procedure over there, and some of the things he's found out and learned. And I think you'll find him very informative. And we've got the members of the committee here. Representative Holmes, Representative Williams, Representative Lindsay, Emerson. We didn't have any women, so I'm certainly glad you showed up. So thank you very much for being here, Freddie. And we really do appreciate you all coming out to this meeting. I'd like to thank a couple of people. When I got started with this about looking at market skills education, one of the people that had contacted me early on, he's not here today because he has the flu, was John Sherman from the Fulton County Taxpayers Association. And I'd read some information about some things they'd done up in Kentucky. And he supplied me with some additional information, particularly about our state, where we have youth between the ages of 16 and 19, almost 42% are unemployed that are African American. And Caucasian youth unemployment is over 20%. Interesting enough, when you try to find statistics, some are sort of out there and it takes you a lot of discussion with a lot of people. But to the best of my knowledge, what I've found out in Georgia, we may graduate 20% of our children from a 4-year academic college. The national average is 18% that we graduate from college. Our dropout rate between 9th and 12th grade, I was corrected recently, I was using the number from the year before, 43% of 2 years ago, 9th graders would not finish high school. And now the number's about 30%. We're making some progress. But anyway, over the last few years, whether you're Republican or Democrat, it's been 30 to 40%. And that's just not acceptable. And not only is it the right thing to do to see what we can do to get these kids in school, but it's an economic development issue. My saying for folks has been, if we can't get anywhere on our roads and our workforce is perceived as uneducated, why would you locate your company in Georgia? And it's a crisis, and it's the nice thing about it is bipartisan, because it's been going on forever. And we need to come up with a bipartisan solution. And that's really one of the points of this committee, is to get information, to learn about the issues, to learn about the problem, see what other people have done well, borrow it, adapt it, and make it fit for Georgia, and hopefully to go forward and reduce these statistics and have our citizens become a lot more productive. We're going to try to stick with this agenda. And it's interesting, we've got some people that were kind enough to come from out of state. Our first speaker is going to be Hans Meter. Hans lives in Columbia, Maryland. and I grew up in Maryland. It just happened to be a coincidence. He's got a degree from the University of Maryland, as well as an MBA from the University of Maryland. And he's president of the Meter Consulting Group, and they provide consulting services and school improvements related to high school redesign and career and technical ed and adolescent literacy. He's got an extensive and varied career in education and workforce policy. Before he formed the Meter Consulting Group, he served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Education in the U.S. Department of Education Office of Vocational and Adult Education. For you people from the press, I'll give you all this stuff if you would like to have it. He's directed critical research on adolescent literacy and the Smaller Learning Communities program to help larger high schools restructure to offer students more personalized and rigorous educational opportunities. He also oversaw implementation of the Carl Perkins Vocational and Technical Education Act and was a leading voice in helping articulate how modern career technical ed efforts can play a pivotal role in transforming high schools and raising student achievement. One of the reasons that I asked Hans to be here was because of his role in this Carl Perkins legislation. I joked with him in the car as we went to lunch. As a non-educational background person, I didn't know the difference between Colonel Sanders and Carl Perkins. So I'm very glad he's here, and I would be very remiss before Hans starts his part of the program if I didn't offer special thanks to the Southern Regional Education Board and Gene Bottoms, who's helped me organize this program, future programs. We have a tremendous resource here in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm ashamed to say for the first 6 years I was on the Education Committee, I didn't know what a great tool they were. And we're going to use them a lot more going forward. They're wonderful people, and Gene's in the back of the room. He's very modest. But Gene, thank you for all your help in this and the future seminars we're doing. So Hans, you're on. And with his accent, you'll be able to tell he is from Albany, Georgia. Go ahead.
We're almost there. One more time. Okay, very good. Thank you so much for having me this afternoon. I used to sit as a staffer for the House Education Committee, one of my many hats I wore. So this is the first opportunity I've actually had to testify before a legislative committee. And I want to thank you for such a great turnout among the members. That's not always the case, I know, with your busy schedules. I'm going to cover a lot of ground over the next few minutes and hopefully not get too deep in the weeds, but really give you an overview that'll help you in your deliberations about how to help our education system be more effective for all youth. First, we're going to talk just briefly about the connection points of high school reform and career technical agricultural redesign, and how those can really work together and not at cross purposes. And then secondly, I'll give you a quick overview of how the Carl Perkins Education Act works. It's now called the Career Technical Education Improvement Act. We've talked about this at lunch, that in past era, we had a highly tracked education system where young people were told you're either college material or no, you're not so bright, maybe you could just get some, maybe you're good with your hands, so you get some vocational training, or maybe, frankly, you're not so bright in general, so we'll just try to get you through school. And that was really what the 20th century looked like in a lot of education. And you read the research and how decisions were made. Two of the major miscalculations of the 20th century were believing that intelligence was fixed based on race, based on low expectations, ethnic prejudices, not just racial, but in general, a lot of the education decision makers thought that many young people just didn't have any serious aptitude for learning. But then there was also a problem with believing that our economy coming out of World War II, we would always be the predominant world economy. We were the only economy left standing after World War II. So there was a way of trying to educate people for the jobs that existed as we saw them, and not an understanding that we needed to be educating our young people so that they could learn and adapt as the changing demands of the workforce force them to learn new skills. So we have examples in Western North Carolina where a large textile plant recently laid off 4,000 people. Half of those people didn't even have high school degrees. And they had just been hoping that they could hold on, I guess, until the retirement age. They weren't prepared for the demands of today's economy, and that's the legacy of some of the decisions from the 20th century. So how do we create an education system that works for the 21st century? Well, there's a lot of voices in this debate. The American Diploma Project is an organization it's a project run by an organization called Achieve, Inc. 22 states are working with the American Diploma Project, one of which is Georgia. And they're looking at the basic idea of how do we restore the meaning of the high school diploma, so that when somebody graduates from high school, we know that they're ready for college or they're ready for the high-skilled workplace. You can get a low-skilled job without a high school degree, we know that, but to get any kind of significant family earning wage, you've got to have at least a good high school education and probably more than that. And then how can we make sure that all of our students are taking this rigorous college and work-ready curriculum? How do we create the accountability for our schools so that we know that students are ready? But I'll be honest, in this discussion, there's an easy move to basically saying, well, we can get there just by having all students take Algebra 2 and taking geometry or taking physics. We can simplify the debate so much that we end up just raising course-taking requirements, thinking that somehow magically young people will learn that content without seriously thinking about how are we teaching the content. Are we teaching it in a way that's relevant and meaningful to the student? The concern that many of us have in education is that if we don't change the way we teach and the way we offer educational choices to our young people, we don't have any clear evidence that just putting them in more challenging classes will give us the results that we want. So I also worked with the Association of Career and Technical Education. We wrote this report, Reinventing the American High School for the 21st Century, and specifically talked about a new vision of the American high school that draws upon the strengths and the resources of good career technical education programs. And Dr. Bottoms was an advisor on the formation of the report, and we appreciated his input. There were 9 recommendations. I won't go through them in any great detail now. We did say that we need to have a system where we have high expectations for all of our young people, with the idea of being ready for both college and work. We're not saying that every student has to go to college, but readiness is the central idea. How do we make sure that they're ready to do college-level work or to go into the high-skilled workplace where they can earn a family wage? And we need to make sure that we have personalization in the decision-making processes. Most of our students, SREB calculated that 70% of high school students have almost no guidance while they're in high school. Maybe if they're already a college prep mentality student, they'll get some guidance about how to fill out college applications, how to go through the paperwork process, when to take the right test. But the idea of actually integrating career awareness and career interest with what they're going to do beyond high school doesn't exist for most students. So creating a personalized approach where every student can be thinking about career options and then what are the implications for that when they finish high school, so that they're not waiting till they go to college or till they finish high school to start thinking about career options. Relationships, again, an important piece of connecting young people to adults in a positive way. The career technical student organizations have the best thing going in terms of character development and building strong, positive relationships with young people and their peers and other adults. So I'm going to go through these now just for the sake of time. The Perkins Act is the federal legislation, goes back to 1917. It was called something different back then. But there's been a long history of federal involvement in the vocational technical education. In some ways, that's been very, very positive. In other ways, it may have perpetuated thinking about education as you're either an academic student or you're a vocational student. It's an extremely important resource, and over the years, it has become more and more focused on challenging academics and helping students make the transition from high school to post-secondary education. And when I use the term post-secondary education, I'm not talking just about four-year colleges, talking about a range of certificate programs, two-year degree programs. The opportunities are limitless for young people today. The new legislation was just signed in August by the President. Congress had been working on it for a number of years. This legislation will be in effect through 2012 and had overwhelming support, bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. It stresses accountability and program improvement. The previous legislation began collecting data on school improvement and school performance, both at the secondary level and at the post-secondary level. But this legislation puts much more of an emphasis on improving the outcomes, improving the programs at the local level. There's a strong emphasis here on connecting secondary and post-secondary systems, a continued emphasis on rigorous academics, and more of an emphasis on connections to business and industry than had existed in the past. There's two parts to this law. There's a basic state grant, which is called Title I, and there's some other little programs under there. And then there's the Tech Prep program, which has been in existence for about 15 years. Tech Prep, many of us know that it's intended to help students make a transition from high school into post-secondary education. The way that the funding is shared within the state education agency, each state determines which agency is going to be the lead agency. Here, it's your Department of Education. And at the state level, they can keep 10% of the funds for what are called leadership activities. And that is for special projects to help create new resources for local school systems and local colleges to take advantage of. Then 5% of the funds can also be set aside to help actually fund staff for administrative purposes to carry out the state's responsibilities. The remainder of the grant, 85%, has to be shared with local recipients, whether it be school systems or colleges or regional technical centers. And every state determines how much is going to go to the secondary providers and how much will go to your post-secondary providers. The national average is about 65% going into the school systems and 35% going to post-secondary. I understand it's about 50-50 here in terms of sharing that local portion. The funds are very flexible. You can use them to purchase equipment, to pay salaries of instructors, to develop new curriculum, to train your teachers, which is a high priority. We know that professional development and the skills of teachers and the knowledge of teachers is really the key determinant of student success. And you can pay for other costs that are directly related to the program. In this new law, it was passed in August, but there'll be a transition phase so that the state will have ample time to make sure that you're implementing it, not just in kind of minimum compliance, but to actually implement it in the way that's most advantageous to you and your schools. So you'll submit a transition plan in April of 2007, and then a final plan a year later than that. And as we said, the accountability system has been ramped up in this new law. There are various indicators for your high schools and for your post-secondary, and those indicators are what the local programs will be judged on in terms of performance. Every local program now will have to take those indicators and set performance targets that they will either receive from the state or maybe they will negotiate it with the state. They have the right to ask for negotiated targets. And then they have to show continuous improvement on those targets. They have to use measures that are called valid and reliable, where the assessments they're using can actually be proven that they measure what they say they're measuring and that you're getting consistency in the way that a test or an assessment is administered. So there's a number of assessments, indicators for high schools. For instance, part of the assessment will be using your math and science scores that you use to report on the No Child Left Behind Act. Very importantly is a technical skill attainment indicator. And most states up to now have not had what we call valid and reliable assessments for technical skills. So that will be something the state will have to consider. How is it going to meet this requirement of having ways to measure technical skills that isn't just the teacher feels good about a student one day and marks them off as proficient? That's some way of more objectively measuring that. And then also looking at the key idea is how many of our students are graduating and are moving forward into either high-skilled work or into post-secondary education. So that's what these other measures are aimed at capturing. At the last one here, participation and completion of non-traditional programs. For a number of years, the law has put an emphasis on making sure that young women are getting the opportunity to pursue programs that maybe are traditionally have been dominated by young men and vice versa. And for economic equity, that's really important to make sure that our young people are not just writing off a whole profession based on a sex stereotype, but are thinking differently about what those options are. In post-secondary education, we have similar pieces where they will have to show the students are getting the technical skills. Most importantly, in post-secondary, are they graduating from the program? Are they leaving with a credential or certificate or a degree, or are they going on into military service or going into a 4-year program? So again, from a policy point of view and from a program point of view, you'll have to make sure that your post-secondary systems have ways of tracking this data so that you can report data back to the state and then to the federal government that's reliable. And again, as I mentioned earlier, if the state fails, if the state or the local providers fails to meet their performance targets, 90% of that target, that's when this improvement and/or sanctions protocol kicks in. Basically, if your local school system or your college doesn't meet its target on one of those indicators, that then the state would you'd have to create an improvement plan at the local level. The state would have to provide some technical assistance to help you improve. And in the old system, if you had basically, when you cut all these indicators up, you might have 12 indicators. The old system allowed you were exceeding one of your indicators by 20% and missing one of your indicators by 20%. It kind of all washed in the mix together. Now you are held accountable for each individual indicator. So that non-traditional thing will really count. Academic achievement, technical skills, all of those can't be masked, as well as they will now also have to be reported by the same disaggregation as you're using a No Child Left Behind. So you can make sure that there's racial equity, socioeconomic equity. So this talks a little bit more about the accountability process. You'll have lots of time to think about that. Some of the things that the state has to do with its funding. The state has to look at the quality of its CTE programs with a focus on special populations. It has to demonstrate how it's going to improve the use of technology in its career technical programs, and provide its professional development. Yes, sir. Oh, thank you. CTE, Career Technical Education. Thank you. Provide professional development. This is another significant shift in the new law. There's a very specific guidance that one-day workshops that aren't really connected to a professional development plan are not acceptable. We have to think about ways of helping our teachers on an ongoing basis so that they can take that information and integrate it into their teaching. And then supporting the integration of academics and CTE. Now, on a policy side, you might want to consider, for a long time, the career technical educators have been encouraged to bring academic content into their classrooms. And that's been very important, and we've actually made some significant progress in career technical educators being able to supplement academic teaching. One thing that has not happened very much at all, Kentucky is trying to pilot some new approaches to this, is bringing applied contextual content into your traditional academic classes. So Kentucky State Board just passed a provision that all of its students will have to take Algebra 2. But they are also beginning professional development to make sure that their Algebra 2 teachers are learning to teach differently so that they can reach more students. So career, technical, and academics don't have to work against each other. They can definitely work together, but it's going to take some approaches that really push integration both ways. How am I doing on time, sir? Okay. And then some more state requirements. They have to provide preparation in these non-traditional fields. The law now makes a reference to high-skilled, high-wage occupations. That did not exist before. So as a state, you will have to determine a very specific definition for these to make sure that your programs really are preparing students for the jobs that are here or will be here and will help them lead to economic self-sufficiency. They have to support partnerships. Again, there's a strong emphasis on the secondary, post-secondary partnerships. And down at the bottom there, have to provide the technical assistance for local recipients. There's a number of similar requirements that every local applicant will have to carry out in order to get their funding from the state. I've been benchmarking, studying a number of states of how they do their work and looking at what Georgia's doing. Georgia's in a very good place with using its current authority to help locals improve. Frankly, many states do not use the levers that they already have available to them to drive local improvement. But the new law will actually force the states to be a little more aggressive in how they deal with their local programs. A major addition to the new law is what are called programs of study. And here in Georgia, you're calling them career pathways, which is a little more user-friendly name. It's the idea of having a program of study that is available to a student when they're in high school, and they can see that there's a way that I can start now toward a college future, and not just kind of a very fuzzy college future, but a very specific around a career area. So a program of study that has to be implemented in the local area would incorporate and align secondary and post-secondary systems together. It'd have strong academic content, have the strong career technical education content in a non-duplicative course of study. So basically what this requires is that the high schools and the colleges buy in to the same sequence of skills and knowledge so the student doesn't have to duplicate the same classes when they get on the college campus. And it will also give the student the opportunity to acquire college credits while they're still in high school, because you'll have this agreed upon framework for how you structure the programs. And ultimately, these programs need to lead to an industry-recognized credential or a post-secondary degree, either an associate's or bachelor's degree. And relate to current and emerging work opportunities. Just asking students to take classes that they think are going to be fun versus ones that will actually lead to gainful employment. So at the local level, shutting down a program is very, very difficult because there's a lot of emotion attached to it, there's history attached to it. So at the state level and the local level, you have to have some decision-making processes for which programs need to stay and grow and expand and which programs need to be phased out. The programs of study will build on the tech prep model and other reforms that are in the discussion, career clusters and career pathways, career academies. And an important change from tech prep, however, is that tech prep was almost entirely locally developed. A teacher at a high school and a teacher at a college would get together and create an agreement. Under this approach, the state has to approve a series of career programs of study that can then be adopted throughout the state. And every local recipient will have to offer at least one program that meets the requirements of a program of study. So when I was at the administration, we were proposing that all programs be programs of study. Congress didn't go that far. They kind of went one step, got their toe in the water here, that at least you'll have these programs at every local level, but from the colleges and the high schools. Tech prep. The new law gives the state much more discretion on how to deal with tech prep. First of all, you've got to have a single state plan that if you decide to keep tech prep as a separate program, one plan that you submit that shows how you're coordinating your state grant program and your tech prep program. But the state also has the opportunity to combine the funding streams, and in doing so, create one single program using the tech prep dollars. Sure. Yeah, sure, thanks for asking. Tech Prep is a program, it's about $110 million of federal funding. The state receives the funding and can either send it, they basically create a series of regional consortia around the state that consist of high schools and post-secondary partners and maybe employers, preferably employers. And the tech prep program is supposed to be very much what we just described when I talked about program of study. What was happening, though, within the dozen or so years of tech prep is that the implementation of that program was very spotty. Some states had very strong guidance of what tech prep looked like. Other states had very weak guidance. And you ended up not having a consistent approach even within a state. So what Congress did was take the idea of tech prep and move it into the main program. So now all the main grant program is moving toward that idea of having these seamless, connected programs of study, which is what tech prep was originally meant to be. For that reason, Congress decided to create an option for the state to fold the tech prep dollars into the state grant program and just run one program. So it'll be interesting to see how states either act or don't act on that particular piece. I'll end here just with restating what I see the value of career pathways or programs of study, because we are clearly in a competitive global economy, and our education system has to be highly competitive and efficient. We have to design the system for the 21st century rather than trying to prepare people for the 21st century on a 20th century system. And as the pace of change quickens, our young people need to be able to adapt. So career pathways give more flexible preparation for a career area and then specializing in a career area. And the students get that opportunity to master higher level skills in a context of a career area that they have an interest in. And then finally, it's that motivation piece. So many young people just aren't motivated. A lot of our dropouts are pretty well educated but very bored young people. And so creating a motivation for young people to see why are they doing now what they're doing, and if they can understand the connection to what they're going to be doing after high school, that's an important piece that's missing from most of our education discussions. So that's a very brief overview. I hope I didn't get too deep in the weeds, but I appreciate everyone's attention. And
Hans, you did fine. I'm going to let the committee members ask you some questions,
Okay.
and I'm sure they all have. I think the one thing, now, folks, we're going to have, the Department of Education is also going to be speaking, as well as Mike Vollmer will be here a little bit from Technical and Adult Education. You indicated the DOE will administer the Carl Perkins here in Georgia, and roughly, what kind of dollars are we talking about that we get from the Carl Perkins? Just a... I don't...
Yeah.
36 million. All right, so we get, just so you all know, we get 36 million from the feds on what we're talking about here. And they're going to talk about DOE and they're going to talk about technical ed, their budgets and everything in this area, but that's what we're getting out of the Carl Perkins. I'm going to ask the committee members if they would like to ask any questions at this time. Give me a number, Bob.
either I've dazed and confused everybody, or I've answered every question thoroughly. Please go ahead.
Bob? Okay. Melvin? Anybody?
Good.
Michelle, anybody in the audience, do you have any questions?
I'll make this presentation available to you also.
Okay.
So you
Oh, wait,
have
we
it.
got one.
Sure.
We found one.
Okay.
Try that one out.
Yes, sir.
In melding the academic and the technical, in Dalton, we've got this started with a career academy. And the college is going to put a building right on campus with this sort of thing. Is the state going to have to do anything different as far as graduation requirements, as far as somebody getting a diploma? Can it be a combination of academic and technical to get a diploma, or is it got to be one or the other?
I can't speak exactly for Georgia, but in general, as long as they meet the high school requirements for academic courses, they'll be fine. And then there's ample time to take the technical career-related courses as well. Now, some states, and Georgia has a couple of these programs, I believe, that allow, for instance, say you have a geometry requirement. You can take a graphic arts / geometry course that captures all the standards around geometry, but also allows the student to take the graphic arts curriculum. And at the end of it, on their high school transcript, it'll say graphic arts and it'll say geometry. And so in terms of going on to college, they basically completed their geometry credit, but they did it in an integrated method.
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is the right time to ask the question, or perhaps someone from the Department of Education, but I would kind of like to get an feel for how this works in an actual classroom at high school as a kid moves through, because you touched on something early on in which you talked about historically why this sort of programs have been looked down upon by the educational system because of, I believe, what you mentioned was race, ethnic, and I would also add social. My father-in-law was pegged because he came from a working class family as someone who would never achieve anything other than technical school. And fortunately, somebody changed their mind because he's now a doctor. But my point is this, I'd like to hear how this works for a child as they go through the high school program in terms of how they get into it, and if they should change their mind and want to pursue more of an academic side, how they get out of it.
Right. Well, ideally, in 8th grade, they'll be taking some sort of an assessment that helps them get an idea of what career interests they have, inherent career interest. But that wouldn't tell them they had to be a certain occupation. It would just be a decision-making tool. And the high school then would offer a number of career pathways. For instance, I believe it's in Georgia, in South Carolina, where every one of their local schools will have to offer at least 2 or 3 of these career pathway programs. The thing that's really important about the way these are designed is that they're not designed with lower level academic courses. So you're really talking about getting a college prep academic preparation, but you're getting it wrapped in a flavor that you really like. And the flavor is what you might call an interest. Now, if a student is really math science oriented, then you could have a math science program. You could have a liberal arts, performing arts program. You could have an automotive tech or transportation emphasis. The idea is to give a little more area of customization for what the student experiences, but not water down the academic side. And what that then allows is that they can change lanes and not be held back. One of the worst stories I ever heard was a young woman who just was a whiz at graphic arts, but she had not taken academic courses to allow her to pursue graphic arts at the college level. And the only local place where she could have gotten a graphics program was in a university setting. And so she wasn't able to pursue that. So that's very important to destigmatize these programs, is to have a high level of academic expectation mixed with really solid career, up-to-date information to allow them to make the connection between what they're learning now and what they want to do in the future. But it should not limit them from making that change. And so if they get in 10th grade and they've had enough of the law enforcement side and they want to just go back to a traditional college prep program, they'll be on track with their prerequisites. So,
Bob?
I know that abroad there's normally seems to be a closer connection between the private sector, business community, and the schools. And you look at a lot of schools in Europe, I guess Germany is involved in Asian countries. How much do you think that needs to be a bridge, a gap, whatever it needs to be
yeah.
lessened in terms of having students become more interested in the kind of vocational technical kind of things, the job training, the career paths? Is that a problem?
Well, yeah, as you say, in Europe, the business involvement is legal. They have these business education chambers of commerce, they call them, and so America's business culture and education culture is so different. It'll never get to that being that highly structured. But on the other hand, if we don't have employers involved in looking at the structure of the programs, the effectiveness of the programs, this is a way that you can engage the employer community where you're not just asking for a blank check, but you're engaging them because they need highly skilled workers who not only can run a machine or work in a factory, but who can think and solve problems and work in teams. So very much the things that we used to associate with just kind of college level skills are really what all workers need now. So the employers have a vested interest, and they need to be brought on in a way that makes sense to them. So there's probably different levels of business involvement. There's probably some activities at the state level that you can consider, and then at the local level, work-based learning and internships are an important way for students to kind of test drive what they're learning about in the classroom and get a sense of whether it really is a good fit that they want to pursue. So I think that as you're looking at career pathways, you're right on track that you have to think about how can we creatively engage our business partners so they see that this is something really that is going to help build a pipeline of talent that will eventually move into the workplace.
Great, Fred.
Yes. If we have about 70% of our students that are not engaged in counseling sessions or with the high school counselors, how are we going to transition these students into the career path opportunities, the technical training?
I don't think you will. If you don't deal with the counseling issue and the helping students make decisions, not career decisions, they're just making a decision about what they're going to do in high school. And but yeah, and again, South Carolina, you'll hear from in a few weeks, they were very serious about dealing with the ratio of counselors to students, but also taking some of those counseling functions and moving those into your overall school improvement strategies of having smaller groupings of adults interacting with smaller groupings of students. I know the High Schools at Work program stresses advisories as one of the key principles, to have students not just sitting in a homeroom, but actually a structured, kind of standards-driven approach to helping students make decisions and think about their future. You can use electronic tools for career assessment and putting together plans so that when they spend time face-to-face with the counselor, that's really focused on talking and discussing, not just filling out the paperwork. So electronic tools for that kind of decision-making and exploration could be quite helpful too. But you have to create a structure for those decisions to be made.
Exactly, because most times curriculum demands so much attention from the teacher until it's difficult to, I guess, plan and operate and execute these kinds of, which is so important, extremely important for students to have a connection with their career paths and goals and that kind of thing. It's so difficult because of curriculums that are so heavy in the schools.
Yeah, I mean, most of our young people want to be professional athletes, or they want to be lawyers, and maybe they want to be crime scene investigators, because that's all they know. And so we have to have ways of exposing them to what's really out there so they can make informed decisions.
Hans, I want to thank you a lot. I really appreciate, I think, the main part of your presentation. I think what we're trying to do here is obviously on a federal and state level, people are trying to increase academic rigor, and at the same time, it appears that to give people these pathways, they're not pigeonholed. And here in Georgia, if my memory, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Mullins, but I think we're still given, we get one diploma, but we got different stamps on them, okay? And that's the type of thing we have to deal with from a stereotype standpoint. But I want you to know on behalf of the committee, we appreciate you taking the time to come down here very much.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, Hans.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
Dr. Warford, before I introduce you, I'd be remiss. One of the things I didn't talk about was the fact that if we can keep these kids in school and we keep them off the streets, then it may possibly have a wonderful impact on our crime level. And we don't want the kids to ever appear in front of him, but we've got our Fulton County District Attorney here in the back of the room. And I would be remiss if, I think I'm going to hit the right button. I'm not used to doing this. And if you'd like to make a comment or two from there, Mr. Howard, I'll be happy to let you do that. Hold on, please.
Thank you very much. He made the comment about people becoming professional athletes and lawyers. What's wrong with becoming a lawyer? I'm privileged to get a chance to address you. One of the things that I wanted to ask, and that is the program that you've talked about. Is it possible that if your local school system decided not to take part, could it be operated by an independent program separate from the local school system?
I will tell you that we'd probably have a real difficult time with that, with the education lobby. It would start to smell like some people like vouchers if we get private business involved in it. But I say that if we end up doing legislation, if a local school system wouldn't want to do it, could a private firm step in as an option?
Or like the DA?
Or the DA's office? You know, anytime I can use Fulton County's money, that's probably a good thing. But I seriously, I think we'll have to have some flexibility. I don't have the answer at this point in time because we don't know what we're going to do at this point in time. But I think in working in conjunction with the State Department of Education, and fortunately, you're in a county which one of our speakers at the next meeting will be the gentleman who's principal of Grady High School, who's done a wonderful job in this area. And he's going to be one of our 3 principals on October the 10th, and you might want to hear what he has to say as well. So we'll just have to see how it goes at this point.
Thank you.
And we do hope to keep more of these kids off the streets so you don't see them.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next speaker, Dr. Larry Warford, serves as the project director for the College and Career Transitions Initiative, which is a cooperative agreement between the U.S. Department of Education, the Office of Adult and Vocational Ed, and the League for Innovation in the Community Colleges. He is nationally recognized for his research and leadership in workforce training and lifelong learning, and he makes presentations at conferences throughout this country. His publications include thoughtful articles on comprehensive workforce training, the need for policy change to provide lifelong learning, and other subjects of interest to local, state, and national leaders. He's got his PhD in higher education from the University of Oregon and a master's and bachelor's degree in business and education from the University of Northern Iowa. Dr. Warford, we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, audience. It's certainly a pleasure for me to be here in the beautiful state of Georgia, albeit a brief visit because I'm going to have to excuse myself early enough to catch a plane to Springfield, Illinois, on to the next meeting. The chairman asked me to take a few minutes to discuss our pilot efforts across the country with high school programs linked to community and technical colleges. And when I use the term community college, I'm also talking about technical colleges. So a lot of times I abbreviate, but we're talking about both organizations. Chairman asked me to talk about what we're learning in this project and how it might apply to Georgia. I have provided to the committee a compendium of materials that I'd like to go over after I make some opening remarks about what we've learned. I'm sorry I don't have enough to go around to the audience, but there probably are some extras if you want to look through them. Basically, I start with a key question. And what I think we have to figure out is how can we get our systems of education to work collaboratively with business, industry, and labor, and other organizations to improve transitions leading to student success. The reason we talk about transitions so much is because we all have them, we all go through them. And there are people today that are suggesting that if you want a job that pays a family wage job, you're probably going to have to go to some educational program, not necessarily a 4-year degree, not even a 2-year degree, could be an apprenticeship program, but something beyond high school. The Department of Labor estimates that about 20% of the jobs in this country require a baccalaureate degree. We don't act that way in education. I think we spend probably 80–90% of our time on the 20% that are maybe going to graduate. And I'm going to show you some numbers of what this story really means. But before I go there, this is something that Gene Bottoms and I have talked about. Gene's been a champion and a real national leader in high school reform, and I've spent 40 years in community college administration. We've both been concerned about things in our areas. Dropouts, high school dropouts, there's nothing new about that. There's nothing new about college retention issues. But what Peter Ewell and Dennis Jones and Patrick Kelly are writing about now is that now we're looking at them not as separate phenomenon, but how the two fit together. And that's where the transition notion comes in. They go on to suggest that this is really timely for two major reasons. One, reforms are calling for improved transitions between high school. People are realizing we've got to get our act together between the systems of education and the systems of education and work. We need to value work differently. And just going to college because you want a better life, or having parents want their children to go to college so they can have a better life, isn't the whole answer. There's also a renewed interest in enhancing educational attainment as a key social asset. And that's why legislatures, committees like this, governors, a lot of folks are looking at education because that holds the key many times to how well a region does, how well a state does economically, how well educated are their people. As Chairman pointed out, I had a project called the College and Career Transitions Initiative, between a cooperative agreement between the U.S. Office of Education and the League for Innovation, which is a international 2-year community college consortium. The purpose of our project really is kind of unique in that it focuses on enhancing the role of the community college. For years, the community college and technical college, I think, have distanced themselves from high schools. They didn't want to be considered high schools with ashtrays. And so they spent a lot of time at the next level with the 4-year colleges. But now we're realizing we need to work with high schools so that we can ease transitions between the secondary and the post-secondary system and improve the academic performance at both levels. This is a map of the United States. This is a map of the United States with the community and technical colleges superimposed, about 1,200 of them. And so it makes a very doable number, I think, if we're talking about doing a national project where we have community colleges working with multiple high school districts. We selected 15 exemplars through a RFP process. We had many more applications, and these are the colleges that are doing some exemplary work for us in the area of college and career transitions. We looked at 5 occupational areas: education, training, health science, information technology, and you can see the colleges that are doing the work, law, public safety, science, technology, engineering, and math. There are 16 clusters. We have several products for the project I'm not going to go into, but I think what we're learning from this project is that we can build relationships with secondary and business partners coming from the community college, technical college level, and that we can help students navigate through our systems of education. So why is this really important? If you look at a pipeline pathway, there's different areas of levels that you go through. And the 5 outcomes of our project really mirror the educational pipeline. First of all, we've got to get more people into our post-secondary systems that have learned why they're learning certain things, how it ties to work, so that they don't come to our higher education institutions needing remediation. The national statistics are that 63% of all students that go to a community college require some remediation. Minorities, poor white kids require more remediation than the affluent white kids. And some affluent white kids go to community colleges and technical colleges. And the more remediation you have to take, the less likely you are to finish anything. And that really deals with the persistence in post-secondary ed. You mentioned some numbers earlier. This is what it looks like nationally with 100 freshmen starting in 9th grade. 67 will graduate from high school. 38 of them will directly enter college. Only 26 of them will be enrolled after their first year, and 18 are going to graduate. Your numbers are not too dissimilar. In Georgia, according to the latest statistics I have, 52 of those 9th graders will graduate from high school, just over 50%. And 32 of them are going to go directly into college. That's not 80, 90%. Now, 80 and 90% will aspire to go to college, but they won't go directly into college. Some of them may come in later after military service or work, but the ones that go directly in. And in your state, 21, just over 20% will get through into their second year, and 12% will graduate within 150% of the time. We need to increase the academic and skill achievement in our schooling. The Achieve study that Hans mentioned earlier says that we don't challenge students enough. Most students say once they get out of high school or they drop out or leave successfully that they wish they'd have taken more difficult courses. They wish they'd been challenged more. And I've heard Gene Bonham say students will step up to higher rigor. If they're asked to write a paper once a year, they'll write a paper once a year. If they're asked to write a paper once a week, they'll write a paper once a week. We also need to, once we get people into our system, we need to graduate them in some kind of a meaningful degree or certificate or some other recognized credentials. If you look at this chart, there's that 67% national graduation rate, and 56% directly go to college. But we're only graduating 30% of the people that come to a two-year college with a two-year degree, and only 53% in a four-year degree. So there's some work to be done here. And I believe that the biggest culprit here is the fact that we've not done a good job of letting students know while they're in high school what the possibilities are out there. Like Hans pointed out, they've got this very limited view of the jobs that are available. And there are hundreds of occupations, and there are different levels requiring different skills. And so, as one of our sites put it, career pathways provide a visual connection between education and work. And I think that's a real answer to what we're doing here. And of course, the last thing that we really, or the fifth thing we really want to do, and what our project is seeking to do, is to increase successful entry into employment or further ed. The state of the fact is that the Achieve study here again found that community college instructors estimate that 42% of their students aren't ready for college work when they come to their classrooms. And employers said about that same number aren't ready for work. And ACT just did a study, the American College Testing Program did a study that says that the requirements to be successful in college and the requirements to be successful in work aren't that much different, that they're basically the same. So we have been about, for the last 4 years, really working on the development of career pathways, because as I said, we really see these as visual connections between education and work. And this is the definition that we use. It's a coherent, articulated sequence of both rigorous academic programs and career tech ed that leads to something, and that people can see that you either need to go to an apprenticeship program or to a one-year certificate, or maybe you can go part of the way in high school and then part of the way in a technical program. And the second paragraph of our definition is the process part. These need to be developed and implemented in partnership with our systems of education. The work that we can do to build better bridges rather than bigger separations between secondary and post-secondary and academic and vocational and education and work, that's what we need to do, is build bridges. And so we look at all 16 occupational clusters. We look at, and the Department of the Office of Vocational Adult Education says, you look at jobs, every job, not every job that doesn't take a 4-year degree, every job fits into these 16 career clusters. And so we developed a template, a roadmap, if you will, that people can develop, and I've got samples in your packets. And these roadmaps really feature 4 major things. All students should be challenged to rigorous academic programs. All students should be in career tech ed. The notion of having the non-college bound go to the back 40 of the schools and do something to keep them busy and get their hands dirty, that's gone. That's not what we're dealing with today in the global economy.
Would you repeat that again about the career tech one more time?
About the career path?
About everybody needs to, would you repeat that again?
Everybody should be in career tech education. Everybody in school and education are everybody preparing for their life's work. That's why we do this. And obviously we're preparing for life as well. But for us to say, this is our little kitty over here, and this is what Perkins funds, and it's for special population, I think is a long overdue, erroneous concept. Because what's more career-oriented than going to become a medical doctor or a nurse or a teacher? And just because we don't fund it with Perkins, I mean, we fund things different ways. Our funding streams, I think, get in our ways a lot of times of us being comprehensive. So we're suggesting this, and I can back this up with another slide here. We think that all students should be encouraged and exposed to some dual enrollment while they're still in high school. And I can show you programs where students are getting as many as a year of college while they're still in high school. It shows them they can do the work, it takes some of the mystique out of it, and it gives them that vision that there's something. I mean, we're dealing with kids in high school that probably don't, a lot of times, know why they're learning math, why they're required to write, that type of thing. So we got to relate it to the job and show them how it's going to pay off for them in the future. And the last thing we say in our materials, in our templates, our roadmaps, is that we've got to assess kids earlier in high school, and we've got to assess them often so that they're going to be more apt to be prepared to go to the next level, whatever it is, and be successful. It doesn't do them any good to go to college or go to higher ed if they don't complete anything. and too many of them don't. This is an example of a pathway. For those of you in the audience, you can probably make out there are different colors here, but you've got the years down the side and you've got things across the top. The committee members have numerous copies of these that we've developed. But basically, this is providing counselors, parents, students, teachers, pathways so they can see what a student should take and what they should achieve. And it includes required academic graduation requirements, of course. It includes electives, it includes career tech ed courses, and it includes dual enrollment courses. This experiment that we've done has been so successful now that the National Career Tech Ed Directors Association has taken this template and developed a pathway for every one of the, 80, 90 career pathways in the country. This is a slide that I wanted to reinforce what I said earlier. When we give this presentation, a lot of times I have Scott Hess from the Office of Vocational Adult Education. And he says, if you want to think about the difference between the old Voc Ed and the new Career Tech Ed, that's a good slide, is that the old Voc Ed was for a few students, as I mentioned. Go back there and take the shop courses or home, The new Career Tech is for all students. The old Voc Ed was maybe for a few jobs. The new Career Tech Ed really is all careers, all jobs. And instead of 6 or 7 program areas, we've got 16 clusters and 79 pathways. And Voc Ed is not, the new Career Tech Ed aligns and supports academic ed. It's not something in lieu of. It's like the governor's aide for education. North Carolina said at one of the state policy forums that we do with high schools at work, he said, we don't have 2 groups of students in North Carolina schools anymore, those that go to college and those that don't. So they're all going to go somewhere beyond high school. So we really need to focus then on high school and college partnerships. And I like this slide too, that people talk about. Tony Carnevale's a well-known economist, and he talks about his school just about preparing workers for an education and economy. So if you put too much emphasis on career tech ed, is it going to, swing the pendulum back? And I think that I like his last comments there. It says, if you don't do this, if you don't have the standards reform to fulfill the economic mission and help adults become successful workers, you're also going to fail in them being good neighbors. And I think that really says it for me. So what we're learning from this work is that community colleges, the post-secondary group, can help lead this work. In our project, they've been asked to. We found that the partners are anxious to work together. And we found that if you get the faculty and the staffs together at these organizations, get them to talking contextually and how they can help students think in terms of contextual learning, then you're going to be far ahead. We can reduce post-secondary remediation. We can have people have sights set for them, and they can be more successful as they move from high school into the next level. And we see that the transformation must take place in the context of a P20 or lifetime framework. I want to share with you the contents of the folder and just tell you quickly what's here so that I'm not suggesting that the state of Georgia is not doing some of this work, but I brought examples from other states. And one of the things I brought are all 15 career pathways that our exemplars have provided, so you can look at those. And like I say, you can see how they lay out. I've given you some material about if you want to look at our website, that type of thing. On the left side, I brought you a smattering well, not a smattering, well-selected examples from Wisconsin and from Ohio and from Iowa and from Southwest Oregon as to the work that they're doing and what you might find on the website of those institutions regarding high school and college transitions, tech prep, This is not all new, this is not old wine in new bottles, it's a continuum. And so one of the things that I wanted to share with you is that, and you don't have these, but I'm going to pass these to you. One college, I think, has done a terrific job of showing people what they can do if they take so much work in high school. This is the level you can go and you can become, like, you could be, if you want to be a medical assistant, you've got to go to an associate degree. But if you want to be an aide, you go here, this is what you're going to make. And so students see, they see that progression. They see, okay, well, you know, if I want to be a medical assistant, like say, I'm going to earn X number of dollars, wage range, but if I only want to take 18 credits, I can make $11 an hour. I mean, this gives people that vision that they need.
Is this joint enrollment, what we would call joint enrollment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's more and more colleges offering courses to students while they're in high school. There's an example of a college I used to work at in Oregon where they have what they call the Regional Technology Education Consortium. And what they've done with the help of their intermediate service district, they're using their college shops and so forth in the afternoon and evening. High school students are being bused or drive-in. The local school's paying the college to provide it at no cost to the student. I mean, you can just see this is a startup, and if you want to do startups of that type of thing, you can see what you have. So I really want to give you these folders I have that aren't in your package, but I want you to see what's there. And like I say, I just want to leave you with some examples because it's really, I think we're all starting to push the envelope in the same direction with regard to making sure that we give meaning to those high school, you're giving that diploma meaning, so forth. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Larry, the slides that you showed us, are those in here as well?
They're not.
Can
but
we get a copy
I'll make
of the
them
slides?
available to Janet electronically.
Yeah. And Hans, you will do that as well? Okay, if you would do that. Let me ask you a question, and then we'll go to the committee members as well. Let's talk reality now. We're going to have the DOE speak. We're going to have our adult and technical ed people speak. My experience has been that a lot of times we talk about things like this joint enrollment. We talk about the fact that the young person can take the classes in high school and get credit for college, credit as well as they go forward, and these various career paths and some of the things you've shown us here. The only time I ever hear about anybody getting credit for something for college is when they're going to a four-year academic college, and they start out with so many hours. I mean, as a layperson who's had 3 kids go to college, well, 2 went to college, 1 went to Auburn, I guess. That's the only time I ever hear about that. And my question to you is this: how much cooperation, because we're talking increased academic rigor, how much cooperation are you really seeing between the local schools and the community colleges? How much are they're still in their own turf battle, their own turf war? They get so many dollars per child if they're in the school so many hours. Now let's talk reality. Is it happening throughout the country?
Yeah, it really is happening. That's what you have, a packet full of materials,
right,
which are just some examples. I would say that you could go to any technical community college site and you're going to see pages like the ones I've included for you. It might be fun to look at it. What they're talking about not only are articulated credits, but they're talking about credits that shorten the life of the time that they have to be in college. So if you graduate from high school with these 15 credits,
right,
you don't have to take them over again, college. You shorten the life. It might mean 1 semester less, or I've heard of people even cutting a year off. I mean, I've heard of extreme examples where students earn associate degrees while they're still in high school. Not too many people are going to do that, but it's real. It's happening, and it's very coordinated. Several states have what I call legalized double dipping. It doesn't penalize the high school to have them take a college credit course. In other words, they don't lose ADA, and some places, some states college can't get FTE, but some states, the high school can get ADA and the college can get FTE. It's a win-win situation. So it's really happening, because I think some of these figures I showed you, we've got it figured out that at a 63% remediation rate, and I've had college presidents tell me 9 out of 10 students came to the college had to take remedial math. Right. Well, how much money are we spending on that?
All right. One final question then. A lot of your slides, you showed the map of the United States.
Yep.
With all the dots. And you picked, I'm going to call it the best practices group. I saw one in North Carolina, the Piedmont area. I saw one, I believe it was Sarasota, Florida. And I don't think I saw anything else in the South.
That's right.
Is this indicative of where we are in this progression of what you were speaking about?
I don't think so. I think in a lot of ways the work that the high schools of work has done, which is obviously concentrated, started in the Southeast, is doing a lot of good work. A lot of this, we had 150 colleges apply to be leaders. We had applications from the state.
Okay.
And no, I don't think it's indicative.
Okay, good. Okay. Okay. You're 19, Michelle? Is that right? There you go.
Yes, I don't know.
Yeah.
This is just a mention, but we have saw this going on in DeKalb County with Perimeter College currently, because the Clarkston campus is about a mile from my house. So we have a lot of interchange, and I know Jim Mullins could explain this further, but there are some dollars and transfers from the school and the credits. Okay. The only place that doesn't apply, from what I gather, is if you have a homeschooler. That if they go to a community college after and deal with Hope Scholarship, they can get reimbursed. But if you have a homeschooler who wants to go to take college credits, the state does not reimburse them at that time or retroactively. Okay. So that's something we might also want to look at.
Okay. Thank you.
Doctor, and listening to what you had to say, I think a lot of this success depends on the teaching profession. As it is now, I don't know how prevalent it is. When a kid gets to the point that he doesn't have any aspirations, he kind of gets left by the wayside, no place to go, nothing to do except on the streets. In these programs you've implemented, have the teachers bought into this? I mean, do you feel that they're ready to take on something like this to make the thing successful?
It's an excellent question. And every discussion that we have around making the condition better through things like career pathways gets us into a discussion about teacher preparation and teacher training. And that's why Perkins, I think, really is stressing that. You're absolutely right. Faculty have to buy into it. The places that have been most successful in our experiments are the places where they've gotten the faculty of the college, the community college or technical college, together with the high school. So they talk about who teaches what, where, and this whole notion of how can we help contextualize or make this education be more meaningful to the student. And so we're not only talking about secondary and post-secondary faculty, we're talking about having discussions between the more academic faculty and the more career tech ed faculty. Because as we said, academic and career tech ed should support each other. So yes, I think if you don't get faculty buy-in in most of our educational institutions, not going to go very far.
Mr. Warford, thank you for your presentation. As you and I and all the audience, we know everything revolves around economics. I was particularly interested in the 39% unprepared and the 45% unprepared going into the workforce. Do you have an economic dollar amount on how that's impacting the community as far as economics, as far as those employers? I know they have to retrain and send those individuals back to school to bring them up to the standard in which they're looking for in an employee. Do you have a figure on how much that's costing us?
You know, that's I wish I did, a better figure, because that's how we're going to justify spending more money on counseling and some of the things that really need to happen that Hans alluded to. Do you know what number?
I know that the organization called Alliance for Excellent Education has estimated the lost earnings and economic impact of dropouts at $280,000 per lifetime of earnings and impact for a dropout. So that doesn't necessarily get at the unprepared or less prepared, but actual dropouts.
Yeah. And we know that post-secondary institutions are spending an exorbitant amount of money on developmental ed or remedial ed, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, I justify if we had more people working in transitions, you could fund that by offering less bonehead math.
I believe, the statistic could be wrong, but I think I'm close. I think 30% of our Hope Scholarship people take remedial classes.
Yeah.
I believe the number's 30% here in Georgia. If I'm wrong, somebody correct me, but I think I'm pretty close with that number. I see heads nodding, so I think I'm pretty close. Remember, that's the acronym for helping outstanding pupils educationally. We have 30% remediation, so that's $280,000 per dropout. And depending upon your statistics, we talked anywhere from 30 to 50% here in Georgia over the last few years. So start doing the math on that one as we think about this. Bob, hold on to you. Excuse me.
We can give students who just see Hope scholarships depending on the school system they're in, I guess I have a question similar to the statistical one that was mentioned, and I'm curious as to when you look at these numbers about percentage who graduate and not grade, what, and I know you have a huge select sample, but I'm just curious as to what those numbers look like. We don't have that in terms of those systems, not 15, but you have how many into this consortium? To look at those high school graduates who go on, and I don't know if it varies from the amount of time that they've been in the system.
Well, yeah, you're talking about, what we're doing working, I think is what you're actually saying. And let me give you a couple examples right now. We have a strong research component because we're charged by the federal government to tell them whether or not their investment's working. In Dayton, Ohio, they have the Science, Technology, and Engineering and Math project. They're in 5 high schools, and the cohort of students that were coming from high school to college, their remediation rate in math was under 10%.
Wow. Now,
Their remediation rate for students coming to that college generally at that college was over 30%. The remediation for tech prep was in the 20s, but they got that down, and that's really due to that contextualized learning, getting those faculty, they spent time doing that. Some of the other colleges are experiencing similar kinds of things, but we don't have enough numbers because it takes about 5 years to trace people through a pathway. Some of them started new. But the trend lines are all going the right direction.
I think that's the kind of information that might get folks excited. I realize that it said that this is working in progress, but I think when you look at those numbers and question things about economics, not only the savings, but the productivity and everything thereafter would cause us perhaps to have many more changes than what we might currently have.
Yeah. And the authors I quoted, Kelly and Patrick and Ewell, point out that it's not just the cost in education itself, but a society that's had a higher attainment level puts less strain on medical and other services as well.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your presentation. I know both you and Hans are going to have to probably leave here in a little bit, but we very much appreciate you all taking the time coming in here and do this. And again, if you would get us the sets, get Janet the slides, we'd greatly, very much appreciate it. I'm sure we'll call again upon you for a resource when we need you.
My
Thanks.
pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before I go to our next speaker, one of the things that you all need to know in the audience, and the committee for that matter, we couldn't have put this thing together without the efforts of some people. Janet Jenkins, my secretary over here. I'm going to butcher her name, Natalia Nemtseva from House Research. We all have these fancy books that looks like the King James Version versus a Revised Standard of the Bible. I guess we can say that, can't we, Bob? Everything you want to know about dropouts and everything else. And again, they did logistics for the meeting. So again, I will applaud you all. Thank you very much for all you've done. Also, so that you know, I tried to invite everybody to this meeting. We invited people from the governor's office. I'm not sure if there's someone here. We've invited, I called the Metro Chamber. I called the Georgia Chamber, which is here. You were going to get a plug. I see the green badge. The Georgia Chamber, which is here, which is very much appreciated. As I said, this is very critical to the employers in this state and to economic development. Contacted Craig Lesser's department, also Department of Labor, which is here also. And, you know, folks, this is a universal issue, okay? And we've got to get everybody on board on this thing to try to deal with what I consider one of the biggest crises we've got in this state right now if we don't deal with it. There are not enough burgers to be flipped, even in Metro Atlanta, unfortunately, if we don't deal with this issue. Our next speaker is James Woodard. And for those of you that, when we talk about education, I was not even familiar of Mr. Woodard's position in the Department of Education until he and I sat at a recent meeting and he told me who he was. He's graduated from the University of Georgia, and he's got a master's degree and also a specialist degree in education as well. And in 2005, he was asked to take the reins of the Career, Technical, and Agricultural Education Division of the Georgia Department of Education. And he's done this with a lot of zeal, and he's begun re-engineering initiatives that addresses program standards, curriculum revisions, and accountability. And really, this is where the rubber hits the road between James's department and the Department of Adult and Technical Education. And this is where, no matter what we do here in the legislature, if this is going to work in this state and be productive, I believe these two departments are the key to it. And that's why they've been invited to come here and speak today. So James, that's your introduction. You're on.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be with you today, and very excited about bringing some of the initiatives from the Department of Education, specifically related to career technical and ag education, and specifically focused on a connection to workforce development. What I'm going to do is to just give you a brief overview of the events that led up to what we have currently in our re-engineering plan. I think we've titled our initiative Re-engineering Career Technical and Ag Education for the state of Georgia. I think you've just received some brochures and publications that better explains that. But I want to go all the way back to 14 months ago when Ms. Cox called me to her office, and that's not always a pleasant thing when you get called to the boss's office. But she sat down and she said, James, I want you to consider, with your experiences specifically in agricultural education and some of the accomplishments that you've been able to implement in bringing farming or agricultural education to the forefront of the 21st century. I want you to take a look at the whole perspective of career technical and ag education. Number one, I want you to create a heightened level of excitement for career technical and ag education. In doing that, we need to connect our performance standards in our academic areas to our career technical education area. We need to create performance standards for career pathways. We need a strong connection to workforce development. We need to really figure out the right way of doing post-secondary career and career transitions. And we need a strong involvement with your department with high school improvement. So after a couple of weeks of stewing this over and thinking about how we could organize this, having a personal conversation with Commissioner Mike Ballmer as to the relationship we needed to have in making some of this happen, and others, we decided we would move forward. The department's vision is to lead the nation in improving student achievement, and everything we did within the plan, we needed to make sure we stayed focused on that. We also, at the same time, had a liaison committee made up of the Department of Technical Adult Education, Board of Regents, and the Department of Education, which had just rolled out a vision of seamless education. And 3 particular points there that I wanted to pull out is to ensure that students are prepared for future educational and career goals. They have an excellent and uniform educational advising process, and they do not repeat work that they have mastered. At the same time, the governor's office had come out with some workforce development task force recommendations, and some key points I wanted to pull out there. Connection between business and education communities. Linkage among economic development, employer, and education communities. Building a culture that values a basic education, lifelong learning, and work. So in my first staff meeting after I decided to take this challenge, I sat down with staff and we spent about an hour focused on identifying the misconceptions of vocational education. What do we really have to, what are we dealing with here? What do we got, from the community standpoint, what mindsets have we got to change? And in leaving that meeting, I shared with the staff, it's okay to understand what these misconceptions are, because in the world that we're living in, these are the realities. And so what we have to do from this point forward is focus on creating a positive perception with the changes that we'll make and the alignment that we'll make with our curriculum and career pathways and connection to workforce development. And these were just a few of many misconceptions that we identified that day. We also felt like we needed to create a better philosophical understanding of career technical and ag education. It's a combination of strong classroom instructional experiences. It's a connection to leadership activities through student organizations that Mr. Meter referred to. It's a connection of work-based learning opportunities and an understanding that all 3 of these things fit together to create within the student the concept of lifelong learning. That as a student, I have to continuously understand that if I'm going to be on top of my game in my career, whatever the career that might be, I've got to understand what lifelong learning is. I've got to appreciate it, and I personally have to engage myself in that process for the rest of my life. From there, we basically totally reorganized our unit and put a focus in 3 specific areas. Program delivery, what are we delivering to the teachers of career technical and ag education? Development transition, what programs are we developing to help students transition and for this delivery team to deliver to the teachers? And accountability and improvement. We knew that Perkins 4 legislation would be very strong on accountability and improvement, and we set aside a department for that. And then we went into identifying some signature projects. What must we accomplish most quickly? And the superintendent is very aggressive in putting together a work plan and a business plan in order to make this happen. So the first thing we did, we took a look at the career clusters. We took a look at our program concentrations, and we identified 8 program concentrations. And then we looked at the governor's strategic industries, and we identified 8 career pathways to focus on our first year, to redevelop the curriculum, to revise the curriculum that has a very specific focus on academic alignment. That was a key question for us as we went through the process. What academic performance standards are aligned with these career technical standards? The technical skill development, I think the business community and the workforce community, they really want to see what type of technical skills are being validated from the secondary standpoint. Workplace readiness skills and foundational skills. What are those 21st century learning skills that all students need to exhibit regardless of what career pathway they're in? Post-secondary alignment. How do we create these career pathways to serve as a foundation for a better alignment with post-secondary, regardless of whether it's Department of Technical and Adult Education or Board of Regents. And then how do we align our standards to industry? So these were all key checkpoints of the revision process in the first phase. The program concentrations we identified sort of took all the 16 national career clusters and lumped them together and connected them to what we in Georgia typically have seen in the past as far as traditional programs. From there, we identified how those program concentrations and pathways align with the governor's strategic industries. These are the areas that the governor and his task force says that we're most positioned for in the future. And so from a secondary standpoint, how are we going to align with that? And then we start identifying the pathways. And so within each program concentration, we identified 1 to 2 pathways to develop the first year. Last Thursday at the State Board of Education, the State Board approved the performance standards for these first 8 pathways identified in Phase 1. Our staff is currently working on the performance revision, the performance standard revision for Phase 2. We have incorporated into that DTAE personnel, industry personnel, and teachers, both at middle school and high school level, engaged in creating those performance standards. What we feel like will be the real value of the career pathway alignment is the creation of career pathway certificates, a credentialing process which Perkins 4 will set us up for, and accountability, to validate academic skills, technical skills, and workplace readiness skills. It creates a base of articulation for post-secondary and industry. It creates endorsements from all the major players that with students graduating with these certificates, there's an understanding of there's understanding of the level of skills those students are leaving our high schools with. And then also recognition, a direct tie to Georgia's specific industries who will recognize this.
Can I interrupt you? Help me out. I mean, because I'm the non-educated up here, okay? Not non-educated, non-educated. And I've got someone in one of these 8. I'm looking through the brochure that you were kind of giving. And let's say the business and computer science. We have pathways, which we've talked about, the pathways and such. The kids that are in these programs that you're talking about, are these kids ultimately planning to go to a 4-year college?
They could.
But I'm trying to get away from a stigma routine, okay?
Okay.
If I've got somebody enrolled in one of these 8 things you're talking about here.
I'm a student in the 9th grade
that
enters the system.
Correct.
It's been identified that, and I'll speak agriculture because that's my background. That's a little easier for me. I decided that horticulture, environmental horticulture, is a pathway that I want to journey through. So in the course of and planning for my graduation plan, I take courses from an academic standpoint that better connects me to the academic side of environmental horticulture, and then also align the courses that we've identified in the pathways.
Okay.
There's 3 courses identified for each pathway that are sequenced together to help lead to this end of pathway certificate. So by the end of the 12th grade, I've taken the appropriate academic courses to support that pathway.
So you would have your certificate or credential if one of these fields, for example, or you could go on to college or
That's
two-year
right.
college.
To me, there's several different avenues that you may leave.
That's fine.
Industry.
Right.
I may decide to go straight into industry. I may decide to go work for Pike Nurseries.
Okay.
I may decide to enter the DTAE system in Gwinnett Technical College or another system that offers horticulture, and this could serve. I think we've got to have this conversation as to how the certificates could serve this, but it could be the transition or articulation understanding of moving into a system.
But I'm still, am I going to end up giving you one of these diplomas with a different stamp than the kid that gets the 4-year going to 4-year college stamp?
Will the kid get a different certificate?
He's going to get when he graduates from high school, is he going to get a different kind of diploma?
He's going to receive a diploma.
All right.
Okay. And in addition to that, This is a value-added aspect to that diploma. He's going to receive this career
Credential and
pathway credential.
Okay, good. Okay,
And
thank you.
this will set us up in the next couple of slides into what we can provide to the business community.
No, that's fine. That's good.
I'm just curious, this is something Fran knows about someone I helped raise the spotted old Chinese pancakes workshops. We talk about the plans and everything, but I'm just curious in looking at these sort of exercises for the certification. There's nothing related to, I guess you might say,
Animal science.
animals. And why is that?
Well, if you take a look at phase 3 of this particular, there will be within agriculture an animal science and an agricultural mechanics and technology pathway design.
I don't think so.
Right. Right. Okay. And we raise Yorkshires and Durocs.
Okay. Fran knows there.
But a visualization of what this certificate could look like. This is what we're proposing it could look like. Nothing's been decided as to exactly, even the assessments that will help validate the certificate have not been developed. So what we're working on now, we have phase 1 completed in the performance standards. So our assessment unit is working on creating the process on how we validate this. Also, our curriculum instruction unit is working on developing the task analysis and curriculum frameworks to deliver this to the teachers and the professional development that will need to take place to have it delivered beginning July of '07. But there's also the focus of making sure that as we move through this, that a student moving into industry, that industry recognizes what this certificate stands for. Good. If they're moving into DTAE understands what this stands for. Okay. If they're moving into Board of Regents, maybe we have to create agreements statewide focused on specific colleges within a university that will accept the certificate as having some value for a student moving in. So the foundation is the career pathway, okay, leading to the communication piece, that the certificate being the communication piece for our articulation and transition.
Is there any way we heard the reference earlier?
Well, Bob, speaking of Mike, Bob.
About the fact that, children can actually get college credits. Do these credits that they're taking, those 3, do they translate into
They could.
college credits?
I think that's some discussion that we've got to have as we move forward with all of our institutions, is what does this really mean? And that's the reason we've been strategic in involving DTAE in the development of these career pathways, in the development of the assessment piece, so that when we finish at the end of the day, that communication will have been had, and we can move on with some statewide articulation agreements. Okay. I think one of the barriers we have now is that most of the articulation agreements are bound within a technical service delivery area. They're not mobile from one end of the state to the other end. Okay. And Perkins 4 really speaks on behalf of statewide articulation agreements. This leads to a profile of workplace readiness. For the first time that the Department of Education can share with you what workforce readiness looks like from a secondary standpoint on an annual basis. It focuses on academic achievement, technical skills, high school completion, workplace readiness, career pathway preparedness, all those things that economic development people look at as they're trying to relocate industries within your community. So today, what I can share with you in some fictitious numbers is some technology ed enrollment numbers. That's basically all I can share with you, is enrollment and participation. So we're going to move from a situation like this where I could actually take a program area such as healthcare science, and I can break it down by pathway, and I can share with you the credentialing aspects from a local system all the way up to the state system. And having these numbers will help us, I feel like, deliver industries to our local communities in a way that we haven't been able to in the past. So that we create this profile workplace readiness is recognized by the Georgia Department of Economic Development, Workforce Development, Department of Labor, has local levels of economic opportunity engaged in that conversation. We also have a strong focus in being a part of the high school improvement redesign, secondary redesign, providing the relevance and the relationship, but also in our new curriculum, upping the rigor and having that connected academically. We also last year identified 12 improvement areas. These are the areas we feel like from making this happen at the local level, that all programs at the local level need to focus on. Business engagement, not having advisory committees as much as maybe business leadership councils. Career development, creating that opportunity for every student to go through a set of assessments, inventories, and align and develop a career pathway to help guide their, what we would call the Peach State Pathway plan to graduation. Curriculum development, not waiting until the 9th grade to help students identify their career opportunities, but creating an awareness at the K-5 level, an exploration at the 6-8 level, with strong foundations built at the 9-10, and then career pathways at 11-12. A better professional development rollout to teachers, leadership capacity, new facilities and equipment for our programs. A major concern that we have is that so many of our programs at the local level do not represent what industry expects in their buildings. Career and academic teams. How do we bring career and academic teachers together to really make that integration happen? School certification, recognizing exemplary programs, program certification, having all programs industry certified, and with a recognition system that what's happening at the local level is representative of what industry expects. Work-based learning, creating more entrepreneurship opportunities as well as internship opportunities for students. Transitions to post-secondary and career technical student organizations. We feel like that what we've created and have in plan now is a system that delivers a strong vision, leadership, academic and career-aligned curriculum, seamless transitions, an opportunity for secondary education to begin to play a role in economic development, leadership development, a systematic approach to funding and facilities, and a strong identity and professionalism of the teachers that we have in career technical education. Now, if you take a look, that's important, but why? Students stay in school, students transition to post-secondary education and careers, students' academic achievement increases, students have access to more resources, and students contribute to the economic prosperity of Georgia. So with that in mind, that's basically what we tried to how we tried to re-engineer vocational education, as many of us might perceive it, into career and technical and ag education in Georgia.
James, I got one question for you, and then I got a comment. I need to find a plumber.
I'm sorry?
My wife, I need to find a plumber. I need to find an electrician. I need to find a carpenter. What are we doing at the DOE to engage kids in the high school level for trades? Are we doing anything like, the IBEW? I mean, what are we doing for? I understand the pathways, I understand the clusters, I understand you can go on, you're not limited, but we need artisans at the end of the day as well, even in a service-driven economy.
Right.
What are we doing to advance that? I mean, do we still have, does a kid have access to going out to learn to become a master plumber while he's still in high school?
Yes.
And do we do that through
the career pathway? Let's take auto mechanics. The career pathway might be called transportation and logistics.
We just don't have that one.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right. The brochure is.
Okay.
Yeah. If we go back to.
Oh, that's okay. So we do have okay.
At the end of the day, I think there was a number with Larry of 80-plus pathways.
So you're in conjunction with that number?
At the end of the day, for the state of Georgia, currently we have identified 47 pathways.
Okay, good, okay.
And I don't think the expectation is for each state to engage in all 80-plus pathways.
Right, okay. The other comment is this, and anybody that's in the legislature can answer this question. Before today, when you came in and heard this presentation, did you have any clue at all, members of the legislature, that the DOE was doing anything like this? Again, I go back to a seminar with Rajiv Bottoms. The problem in the education community with all due respect to you all. You keep this stuff internalized, okay? Sort of like your acronyms. What I'm saying to you is this, okay? You will be appearing before an education committee meeting. I will talk to the chairman, Ron Stevens, of Economic Development. Have you appeared before his committee?
No, sir.
You're going to have several appearances here if I get reelected in January, because I'm going to tell you right now, this is tragic that we don't know anything about this. I'm not making light of it. I'm really not. This is a tragic thing. I had to sit down and eat chicken with this guy to find out what he did by coincidence. And I think it's just a shame that we're doing this kind of work and making this kind of effort. And those of us up here that make the big bucks aren't even aware of it. And we're trying to draft policy for the state of Georgia. It is very, very tragic. And so, James, you keep telling your story, and I'll let other people ask you some questions.
May I respond to that comment?
Sure.
14 months ago, this plan didn't exist. This was the focus of the conversation we had with Ms. Cox.
Right.
Bring an awareness level of what we need to be doing to connect to workforce development.
Okay.
This whole slide here was a solid conversation for over an hour of Ms. Cox and her vision to really bring and create a stronger connection of education and workforce development.
Good.
Now, you had some questions that you had asked me concerning dual enrollment.
Yeah, these are some questions that, again, we had 4 or 5 questions. And let him answer these, and then we can go to the individual members' question.
I have with us today Kathy Jo Elliott. She's
Yes.
the program manager
Sure.
for development transition. If you will pass these dual enrollment numbers out, or you explain them, I'll pass them out. We worked with Commissioner Mike Vollmer's staff in identifying some dual enrollment numbers for the past 4 years. You can see at the bottom how from 2002, 7,361 students in dual enrolled programs, dual or joint enrolled programs. This past year, FY06, 7,070 students enrolled. So this is just a compilation from a technical college system delivery area, how many students had a dual enrollment status. Also, you asked about students coming from high schools that failed to get 60%. Students graduate from 9 to 12, graduation rate of 60% or lower. So I've got that information.
Okay. Back up a minute on the first one.
Can I ask the difference between, how do you differentiate between different dual and joint? What is the
definition, the difference? Kathy, I'll ask Ms. Elliott she has a better textbook definition between those two programs. And we also have articulation opportunities that give students credit as well.
The difference between what?
dual and joint?
The difference between dual and joint. Joint enrollment is for high school students receiving post-secondary credit only. So they're enrolled in high school, but they leave their high school after school or whenever and go over to the college and take that just to get post-secondary credit only. Dual enrollment, they're receiving dual credit for both high school and post-secondary. Dual credit and joint credit, they are taught by the post-secondary faculty. Then we have articulation, which starts in the high school. That is taught by the high school instructor who has worked jointly with their post-secondary faculty to align their curriculum. So the students taking that high school course, then when they graduate from high school, they could go to the college and validate that credit and get it added onto their transcript.
And also, you asked some questions about Perkins legislation. I hope I addressed those as the career pathways, creating the foundation for better accountability, for better improvement, for better alignment academically.
The second question is, what % of the students came from high schools that failed to get 60% of their students from grade 9 to 12? What was the overall number, roughly?
For the statewide average, I didn't count the number of schools. But the statewide average, the graduation rate is 70.8. I think that's the first time in history that we've, as a state, we're above 70%. And these are real new figures that you have here.
Remember, folks, that's what we're talking about. 43% don't finish in the past. It's now down to 30%. We've made some progress in that area, just so you know.
We could say 29.2, right?
Yeah, we could. And I think
the remainder of the questions.
Yeah, you answered the rest of them.
Right.
Okay, who else has questions?
Yes, sir.
I have questions about the Hope Scholarships. A question came up earlier. Of the students that are eligible for the Hope Scholarship at the beginning of their college career, do you know what percentage actually graduate from college?
I do not.
No, I don't.
Maybe Commissioner Vollmer might have that information for the technical college system.
We'll get that for you.
Okay.
Other questions?
Okay. Well, James, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I will see you in front of several other committees, I guess, in January, assuming I come back here. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Don't leave yet.
I thought I was out here. 2, 3, 4.
2005 and 2006, it seemed like we had a significant decrease in the number of total high school students. Do you know what happened there?
That was the change in the HOPE regulations.
Okay, I thought that.
Yeah.
But-
With high school students, if they started using some of their HOPE credit hours early, then that would limit the numbers they had when they actually went to college.
Okay, thank you.
Mike, Bob.
This coming year, the new regs come in that the kids have to have an academic curriculum, collegiate type. Does that come into effect, or is that next year?
The performance standards for the various academic areas are transitioned in a lot of different years. It's according to whether it's math or science. It's according to which grade levels. There's a lot of transition opportunities there, and I personally couldn't tell you off the top of my head, but we could give you the transition plan on the academic areas if you'd like to see that.
Okay. All right. You know, I feel a little awkward introducing Mike Vollmer. I'm just trying to think, is there a job you haven't had in Georgia government?
There's a job.
I mean, can you not hold down a job is what my question is. With that as an introduction, he was on some search committee thing he had to fly back here from. I was wondering if he was the candidate. But Mike, I'm going to do it real brief. And you are now the commissioner of Georgia Department of Technical and Adult Education this week, and I'm anxious to hear your remarks. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you very much, and if you don't mind, we're going to be setting this up while I speak. Okay. I want to thank each of you personally for your interest, because what you're focused on is the #1 issue, in my opinion, in the state of Georgia, and that is workforce development. And as we set up the presentation, I'd like for you to think about 3 fundamental things. #1 is how Georgia has and is changing as a state. Now, what does Vollmer mean about changing as a state? Back in the 1950s, 70%, and let me just underscore that, 70% of the jobs in Georgia were for the unskilled. Those jobs went to individuals with a 10th, 11th, and maybe 12th grade education. If we move fast forward to today, over 85% of the jobs that will be here and are being created in Georgia, over 85% of those jobs are not going to be for high school graduates, but are going to be for high school graduates plus additional training. So I want you to think about how fundamentally we have changed as a state in just over 30 to 40 years. That's the first point. The second point that you have touched on and is so relevant is the perception of technical education. You see, the perception has been for years that folks get their hands dirty and that that's not for my son or daughter. In fact, when you go to a high school or a middle school and you talk to parents, every Johnny, every Susie is going to Harvard, Yale, or Princeton. If they can't get into those three institutions, they might get into the University of Georgia. No one is thinking, parents, students, and most importantly, many of our teachers and counselors and principals and administrators aren't thinking about where 70 to 75% of our workforce is going to be, and that's in careers and skills. So I want you to think about the perception. And thirdly, you all have hit on a very important point, and that's this whole post-secondary educational system. Again, what we tend to look at, many of us that went off to colleges and universities and did research and all that stuff, we looked at, you either went to a research place or you went to get your hands dirty. And there was no mixing of either one of those. Times are changing, and this is a point that you all made and is so very relevant, and James hit on that. What we're seeing is students may go into one door and then want to go into another door later. What we're seeing, for instance, in the technical colleges, more and more college graduates are coming into our system because they now have the education, and now what do they want? They want some training. And vice versa. We're seeing a number of our students wanting, after they get out to the world of work, they want to get that 4-year degree because they see the manager of that store having a 4-year degree, and so they want to attain that. So really, that's what I want you to focus on. 3 things is how we have fundamentally changed as a state. Secondly, the perception of technical education today. And thirdly, post-secondary education and what we look like. And to focus on this, really what you want to you want to look at a top to bottom. And what do I mean by top to bottom? What we probably need to focus on in Georgia is what are the jobs of today and what are the jobs going to be of the future. Much of this James talked about, the strategic industries. These are the industries that will grow in the state of Georgia. So we look at those jobs that will be available to our students. Then what we have to do in post-secondary education is create the training programs to get those students educated, trained, and ready for those jobs. But before we do that, we got to go back into the high schools and middle schools and not only train the students, but make students, parents, teachers, and counselors aware of the fact that these are the jobs that are here today and tomorrow. So if you look at it almost like a large, long line going up: jobs, post-secondary education, high school, middle school, some would go down to elementary school as well. But what we've got to do is align our training and educational programs. And I think, Ron, you're just about ready? Okay, what we'd like to do is, and I really want to honor your time because you had mentioned to me that you wanted to finish by about 3 o'clock, so we will go very quickly. But
I lied.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Fran.
We're going past it. We're going to probably 4 at the latest.
Okay, what I'd like to do is show you what we're in the midst of doing, because we've got to change perceptions of this state. We've got to change perceptions of teachers, counselors, and parents that we just aren't dirty hands. But even if they are dirty hands, they are something that's very profitable. And you mentioned automobile technicians, and they aren't mechanics anymore. But I always use this story when I speak to groups. And that is, if you had a car 5 or 6 years ago and that car broke down, you'd probably raise the hood, especially if you were with your spouse, because as a man anyway, well, I wanted to show my spouse, my wife, that I knew what was going on. So I'd raise the hood. I didn't know what to do, but at least I raised the hood. Today, if you had a new car, a year or 2 years old, and that car had you pulled off the side of the road because something was wrong with it, would you even raise the hood, or would you even know how to raise the hood? We're talking about a highly trained automobile technician, someone that operates computers, and this is not what's getting into our kids' heads. So what we want to do is show you just a little demo that we're going to be doing through Georgia Public Broadcasting, to our counselors throughout the state, to our teachers. Just here's what technical education's all about. It's just very brief. I'm sorry about the volume.
With 34 technical colleges spread throughout the state, the Technical College System of Georgia now serves more than 145,000 students annually. 145,000. This is not your daddy's trade school. Oh no. These colleges offer highly qualified instructors, the latest in high-tech equipment, and small classes that assure individual attention to each student's needs. Better still, the job placement rate in in-demand fields is extremely high. The Technical College System of Georgia offers a wide variety of degree and diploma programs in the high-paying career fields that are expected to flourish in Georgia during the next decade. Aerospace, life sciences and biotechnology, healthcare, energy and the environment, agribusiness, and logistics and transportation. There are also unique courses of study: motorsports technology, golf course management, forestry technology, video production, culinary arts. No, these are definitely not at all like your daddy's old trade school. So, where's the catch? Cost, perhaps? Absolutely not. The cost of a Technical College System of Georgia education is significantly lower than at other state colleges and universities. Still, the quality of education is superb. Financial assistance, including the HOPE grant, makes a technical college education very affordable. And earning a technical college degree takes only 2 years. It can actually take less because Georgia high school students can enroll in technical college while still in high school and earn credits toward their high school and college degrees at the same time. Flexible class schedules, including online classes, accommodate working students and others who need the right time and place to get their education. These students are learning far more than theory out of books. A Technical College System of Georgia education is largely hands-on experience. Therefore, technical college students learn skills they can take directly to the marketplace. In fact, there are unique partnerships between the colleges and local businesses and industry that allow students to learn and earn, as well as get a foot in the door of a top company, even before graduating. The opportunity is huge and just around the corner. Visit a Technical College System of Georgia campus today.
Well, thank you very much for your indulgence. And by the way, that was produced by our technical college students. So we're very proud of what they did. But what we really have a large job, James, to do is change perceptions of the state. What I'd like to do, if I can get it, I'm going to run through these slides very quickly because I just want to show you the perceptions that people have about our system. We did a market research study. Our board wanted to see just how people felt about the Technical College System of Georgia. Some interesting survey results. One of those, the first one you'll see, is 2/3 of Georgia high school students are aware that they can enroll and take college courses in our technical colleges. So 2/3 of our high school students today are aware that they can take courses in the technical colleges.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
Are their parents aware?
No. And I'll get to that. Among students in grades 9 through 10, about 60% express an interest. 60% express an interest in taking classes at one of our technical colleges. So again, a pretty good percentage of students are interested. Here you go, though. Only 4% of high school students have taken classes at one of our technical colleges. So we have an awareness level to some degree of students, but you see a very small percentage of them have really taken courses. 60% of high school counselors are either not very familiar or not at all familiar with our agency. What does this mean? Well, we just got these results a week ago, but what we think is that this counselor may be somewhat familiar in Valdosta with Valdosta Technical College, but they have no clue that there's 34 colleges, and they don't have a clue of what all these colleges are offering. Yes, Frank?
I've got to ask you this. We just passed this legislation for these high school completion counselors. They're educating these high school completion counselors. My question is, are they educating them that you exist? Do you know that between you or DEO? Do we know if they exist? Do they know that they exist?
Well, actually, we are, and the superintendent, we're going to make a conscientious effort, because I'm going to talk about a program we started a year ago, but our effort will be to get those completion counselors into our colleges so they can see. That's the only way we're going to make them familiar with it. But yes, we want to do that. But you can see here that the counselors, and we're not blaming the counselors at all, because think of a typical counselor, got a 4-year degree, went on to get a master's degree. That's the route they know, they're familiar with. 56% of high school principals and 72% of teachers are either not very familiar, somewhat familiar, not very familiar with us at all. So you can see, again, we've got a long way to go. Here's something, middle school, look at this. 75% of middle school counselors. So DTAE enrollment information. Wanted to share this with you. This is our dual enrollment. Now, James, it tracks yours, except this is purely dual enrollment. This isn't joint enrollment, tech prep. This is purely dual enrollment. The interesting number to me is in 2004, 2005, we really went from about 8,000 students to roughly 6,000 students. You may say, why? What happened? Well, there's a lot of reasons, I think, but the major reason is the Hope Commission. What we had recommended, if you can remember, was that cap, that 95-hour cap on technical college credits. I think that was a wise decision, except no one, certainly I didn't think of the ramifications. The ramification is this, that high school counselors and parents and teachers are telling students, don't take those technical college courses because your Hope eligibility will be over with that much sooner. What a wrong message. Because the fact of the matter is everyone in this room knows very few people ever use up all their Hope eligibility. That just doesn't happen. But the message is clear out there. Don't take these courses because your Hope eligibility will start counting against you. We think that's a major issue there. And as you probably know, Bill Hembry has a study commission which we're staffing, and we promise to take a good hard look at this, because to us, dual enrollment is a very important program. University of Georgia did a study indicating that over 90% of the dually enrolled students, these are students in 11th and 12th grades that are enrolled with us, enrolled with DOE, one of the school systems, over 90% of them graduate. So we know it's a great program. Dual enrollment data, this is just for your information. These are the major programs, the top 10 programs that students decide to enroll in. And Fran, you asked about a plumber and electrician. I was down at one of our technical colleges in Jessup this morning. One of the things that we're struggling with is recruiting students in those areas. Because again, the message, and I'm sure it's parents and grandparents and everyone else, is you don't want to do plumbing, you don't want to do electrical work, you want to do this or that. And so what we're finding is, unfortunately, in the traditional trades where jobs are plentiful, students aren't all that interested in entering those areas. And this is where what we hope to do with James is make a substantial difference. And that is in the middle schools. High schools are important, but from our perspective, and again, we're post-secondary, so we don't mean to be judgmental on DOE or our school systems, but we feel like in middle school is the time that students need to understand all the wonderful career opportunities out there. Do they know they can fly a plane? Do they know that if they learn about automobiles, they can work on Formula One race cars at Lanier Technical College? Do they know that if they learn plumbing and heating and air conditioning, they could own a business in a few years? So what we have to do, I think, is start in the middle schools and really focus on teachers, counselors, parents, and students and make them aware that there's some great, great opportunities out there. What we're doing in conjunction with DOE, we have used $2 million of our own formula money. We took it out of our schools, and we've started what we call a Stay in School program. We're working with about 145 middle schools in the state, and what we're trying to do is reach the 8th graders in those middle schools, reach the teachers and the counselors, have the students complete career inventories, show them different careers, and then the 8th grade teachers and the 9th grade teachers talk as the students transfer from 8th to 9th grade, and hopefully we can get them in those career pathways that James has done a remarkable job on. Dual enrollment data, we have all the counties listed, I think, in your package, but I wanted to show you the top counties. These are the counties that are really participating in the dual enrollment programs. Adult literacy, go very quickly. These numbers here reflect the number of people, adults, that are coming into our adult literacy programs. And you may say, look at 2004, what the heck happened, 144,000. That was the year the GED test was recentered, recalculated, and a lot of individuals came into our adult programs wanting to try to get a GED. Also, 2006 data is not complete yet. We, for the first time, are implementing a data system. So I will tell you this, from July 1st of 2006 on, you will have very accurate numbers with a new data system. But I wanted to show you, let's just say we serve 100,000 Georgians. The remarkable thing is, of those 100,000 Georgians, 33% of them are here to learn the English language. If you go to DeKalb County, for instance, in the adult learning centers, you're going to see rooms packed with people wanting to learn the English language. Give you an idea of the instructors. If you remember, Governor Miller back in the 90s wanted to place a full-time adult literacy teacher in every county, 159. That was good in some circumstances. In some circumstances, a county may not have needed a full-time instructor. But you see how we make ends meet. We really only have about 300 full-time instructors, where we make ends meet as having over 1,100 part-time instructors throughout the state. I think there's two areas that we're missing here in adult literacy. One is the high school dropouts. When they drop out, we're not out there trying to target them, nor I think anyone else is, in terms of you can come here and get a GED. We're not doing that. Secondly, in the technical college system, we're not doing the job we need to be doing in recruiting GED students into our schools. Because once they get a GED, that's not enough. We need to get them into our schools. The GED recipients, you can see that's increasing. That's good news, but as James said, with a 30% dropout rate, we're losing ground every year. And, sir, that's about all I had. I wanted to be as brief as possible. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions, but I want to emphasize to you, we certainly in our areas appreciate the time and effort you all are going to put into this, because this is going to be a very important subject for the state of Georgia. And if there's nothing else, I'll leave you with, say what you are focused on is, in my opinion, the most important aspect to the future of our state. Thank you, Frank.
Mike, a couple of things, because you were still down Jessup. Our next meeting is going to be October 10th. We have 3 high school principals coming in, a gentleman from Grady, a lady from Dalton, and a gentleman from Camden County, St. Mary's, about what they've done in the high schools. We've also got the gentleman from South Carolina. You know, they passed legislation. My question to you is this. I appreciate the adult technical colleges that we have. I want less people to go there, and I want to keep them in high school.
Yes.
And I want to get these kids interested. You know, you all have said about the middle school level. We talked about the career pathways. We live in the metro area. Those in the metro area here. Like I live in DeKalb County. We've got Perimeter College all around me. Can we get these kids engaged when they're 15, 16 years old in these courses of study so that we can keep them in school versus having them come back and be 25 and 27 and 28-year-old, and you're trying to do it 10 years later? And when Mr. Howard was here, the Fulton County DA said we don't have these kids appearing in front of him.
Yeah.
I mean, can we do this if we look at this Carl Perkins, if we take what we're doing in our colleges? You know, we've got this thing, these critical industries you've identified, or the new Georgia Commission, I guess,
Yes.
did.
Yes, sir.
And James's department is trying to track these pathways to fit what we think the industries will be. It's all, you know, we've got the chamber people here. In your opinion, can we drive this stuff back down to the schools and get these kids engaged? Is it doable from what you've seen?
Yeah, I think so, sir. I think relevance is the key word. And what do I mean by that? What we find is, I'm going to use adults first and then bring it down. Many adults don't want to come to a college, whether it's a technical college or a perimeter college or whatever, because they see English, math, and science staring at them. But if you create a curriculum like some colleges do where they have certificates first, these certificates plunge you into the area of study you're interested in, whether it's plumbing, whether it's heating, whether it's automobile technology. You learn that almost immediately. And by the way, afterwards, the English and the math comes. See, English and math certainly turned me off. But if I'm doing something I'm really interested in, and then they tell me, oh, by the way, Mike, in order to be successful, you got to have this English and math, then you might have hooked them. So what higher education is starting to do is recognize you got to hook them first, these adults. And the way you hook them is to get them into a field that they're interested in and actually get their hands on that. So I would submit, James, what you're talking about is you get them into a career. If it's health, if it's automobile technology, forestry, whatever, you get them in. Let them work on trees out there or golf courses. Learn about that, and then they can get
the reason I asked you that, because it's my segue to what I heard it from Larry when he was speaking. I heard it in one of the states. I was up in Asheville at this meeting with the SREB, where they mandated that you will take in high school some kind of a career path courses or whatever. You will have to take that, as well as English, math, science, etc. And there may be a little heresy around here with local control and some things if we talk this way, but we are in a crisis, and it seems to me that that's the hook.
Yes.
If you make a young person take something that interests them, you keep them in the school, and that seems to be the direction that the gurus are taking, and that's why I asked the question.
The thing I would ask you may not want to do this in your October meeting, but there is a tremendous example right here in the state of Georgia you may know of, and that's the Central Education Consortium in Noonan.
Yeah.
And they have an excellent program where they have people from going into there, going to Georgia Tech,
right,
leaving there, working, and it's just an excellent
right,
example of what can be done.
All right. Who else? Eddie? No?
Just a comment, I think both of you targeted the root of the problem is in that the educators that are working in the schools are not aware. I'm a retired principal, so I know that they are not aware of what technical education is all about. And the mindset is we will place the discipline problems over there, we will place the special students there, and let them just do something with their hands. And they're not understanding that, you know, the kids are in school to earn a living eventually.
Yes.
You know? So the mindset is to, and the public perception is the same. And if we can change the perception of what technical ed is all about, and it has to be over and over and over again, we have to hear it all of the time, not just a workshop here or there once a year. We bring in the teacher that's going to teach it, and we're done with it. We give them a curriculum and say, okay, do it. But it has to be something that we hear all of the time, the importance of technical education. That's the only way it's going to work. Just change the public perception of it.
Yeah, it's a cultural issue because I'm from South Georgia. You know, in 10th or 11th grade, you could drop out and work in that mill or that plant. That mill and plant's closed or will be closing.
Go back to the farm.
That's exactly right.
And the middle school is the perfect place to start. By the time they reach 16 and 17 years of age, the mindset is, I'm done with school. So middle school is the perfect place to start.
Well, thank you. And by the way, I didn't want to cast any dispersions on educators because, you know, until I really got involved in our technical college system, I was kind of university trained, president of a university, and that was my realm of thinking. But now I can see the true value of technical education.
Roger.
Mike,
yes, sir.
Looking over statistics about dual education and all, and I look at my area, and I'm not even on the radar screen, 0. And the disturbing thing about it is we've got the Career Academy established. We're building a Dalton State College building right next to it to do this. Has anybody figured out, and we've got technical college there in Whitfield County, has anybody that's looked at this and said, why? You've got all these facilities up there, and you're not using them. And it's a shame. It's embarrassing to see that and concerned about why that mindset is that we don't use what's available.
You're a pork boy, that's why. Go ahead.
No, it is very frustrating because when you think of it, the students could take these dual enrolled courses, could graduate with a certificate or a diploma from a technical college and from a high school, and they could go on to Georgia Tech if they wanted to, wherever they wanted to do, or the world of work. So it is very frustrating, and what we as a state have made an investment in, they can do that free of charge. Yes?
Is there anything else the legislators can go back home and make awareness?
Well, the Career Academies, number one, is a great start. Many of you are familiar with what's happening in a number of our counties, and I think that's going to show dividends up there in Whitfield. I really do. More of our school superintendents are taking a look at the Career Academies. I think that's a strong statement by the school leadership there that they are going to take it in a different direction. But it's a lot of it's perception. It really is. It gets down to that one word, perception.
Thank you. You have had quite a career here with the state. I feel like I've known you a lot of years. I have a question, a few questions.
Sure.
One of them, adult literacy. Is that also taught in the community colleges or just the technical?
Good question. Adult literacy is taught in 32 of our technical colleges and about 5 school systems. For instance, the Atlanta Public School System has the contract to do it in Atlanta. Savannah School System has it in Savannah. But in DeKalb, that would be through DeKalb Technical College. About every 3 years, the contracts from the federal government are renewed. I think ours is renewed next year. We're going to open it up so that anyone in communities can hopefully request one of these programs.
And going back to the plumbers, electricians, and car mechanics, of which I said recently that I never wanted to be I don't want this one in the press. I said, since I'm single, I said, forget the academic person. I want a plumber, electrician, or car mechanic, or else a TV repairman. And Anyway, I've actually found all 4 of them, and I'm, gotten everything fixed. But anyway, the thing about that is, people switch careers all the time.
Yes.
For the mother or father who doesn't think the child should do it, what they also need to look at is these are good paying jobs that could take a year or 2 to get and very easily finance their way through medical school, law school, or some other source. So they're not coming out of law school or medical school with hundreds of $1,000s of debt, which they are looking at nowadays. So there's many different ways of elevating the concept. And again, as you've said, owning your own business, but you could also look at it as that stepping stone, that thing that the student could begin doing in high school, taking classes, being able to work at as a summer job, as a job during his college career, so that when he goes on to post-secondary college.
Shell, I couldn't agree with you more. But go back to that message that child is hearing, or the student's hearing in high school. Johnny, where are you going to college? Where are you going to college? Where are you going to college? And the other interesting fact is, think about just the number of students that actually graduate from college that start. And so what happens to them? And you're absolutely right. It's the message, the perception, and we're all, I think, to blame on that, because we force kids into a peg that they may not really want or ready for. And what we're seeing, though, in higher education, as I mentioned, people are going in and out of doors now. They didn't do this in the past. They may go to college, get that degree. They may then come back to a technical college, vice versa. So it's happening more, but we're still not sending the right message to the students in middle and high schools about this.
Are you going in and talking to principals, talking to the teachers? I mean, are we taking advantage of I'll give you a great one. I'd love to have you come on and talk to PRISM, Pride Wings and Stone Mountain, about education and the advantages, especially since I have Perimeter College and DeKalb Tech right there.
Yes.
But going out through different organizations, or Jim, maybe you can help me. Don't you get all your principals together, or your different teachers together, different things that they could present at to help educate? So they're not having to do one school at a time, and which is very time consuming.
We're actually starting a year-long effort this year. We're having, if you remember, the Taste of Technical Education down at Depot for the General Assembly. We're having a Taste of Technical Education for all the counselors in the state in Savannah. I think it's November the 5th or the 6th when they meet down there. What we also want to do is get into the schools, show them the material, show them we also have a production made by our students, Roadshow it's called. I believe there's 11 episodes of it, showing the wonderful opportunities in our technical colleges. So we really want to make a year-long effort. But I believe the biggest impact we're seeing right now is the small little program that we started, Stay in School, where we're working in about 145 middle schools with teachers, counselors, parents, and students. And I think we're going to see some real results. It's a 2-year program, and again, we're funding this with our own money. And what we want to do is let me say the outcome of it is we want to see a reduction in the dropout rate. So we're following those students that were in the 8th grade, they're in the 9th grade this year, and we want to see if what we did will make any difference in the dropout rate in those school systems with those students.
Mike, thank you so much.
Fran, thank you.
Yes,
thank
sir.
you all very much for your time. Thank you.
I guess the bottom line, I think a lot of us have learned a lot today from the people we had speak. I hope on October 10th, we learn as much from the 3 principals who've been successful in their own areas. And I think at the end of the day, I think that this committee, we're going to try to come up with some initiatives that maybe tie this all together. I think the good news is it's nice to see 2 departments in state government actually talking to each other, Mike. You and James, I'm very happy to see that. That's very unique around here. But again, I urge you to, at the next meeting, I'll call him Roger. He said to me, it's a shame we don't have every superintendent in the state of Georgia in this meeting here today. again, I think we're making progress, sometimes in spite of ourselves. And I think if we continue down this path, that maybe we can come up with some solutions to this problem. It's nice that it's at 30% versus 43% for dropouts, but at the end of the day, it's still too much, and we're going to have to take a concentrated effort and really change the attitude of perhaps ourselves as well as the other citizens in this state, that everybody does not have to go to a four-year academic college, because obviously with a less than 20% graduation rate under anybody's system, that's just not acceptable. Thank you all for all your time, and next time I'll probably try to remember and do better. For those of us over 50, we'll have a break after 2 hours, I promise you. Thank you for your time. I'm doing it at 1 again, because that way the guys from out of town. Excuse me. Oh, you're